In this video, we're going to explain the tool menu in the object creation mode or the level editor mode. We can open the tool menu by either clicking on the tools button in the top right when you're in level editor mode, or you can press the enter key on your keyboard to toggle the menu open and closed. By default, opening the menu does not pause the game. You can always press the pause key on your keyboard to pause if you wish to pause before opening the menu. The first two buttons at the top of the menu are just buttons used to toggle through the available list of objects. You see a preview of the object you have selected is attached to your mouse pointer, as well as some text explaining the object and whether or not it has some sort of special function or not. The next two buttons simply toggle you through the colors. By default, different colors have different density ratings and therefore are heavier than other colors. In general, the darker the color is, the more heavier it is. The next two buttons simply alter the rotation of the object you are going to place. All of these options up to this point have keyboard shortcuts. You can press left and right on your keyboard is another way to toggle through the available objects, and the page up and page down keys toggle you through the available colors, and the up and down keys toggle you through the rotations. The next two buttons affect a attribute called constant torque, which basically means this amount of torque or spinning force will be constantly added to an object, causing it to spin. These buttons add a value of 30 to the current value of your constant torque. So for example, if I press this button twice, we'll have a value of 60, which stands for newtons per second of force. And if I enter this object, it will have that amount of spinning force on it all the time. You can also simply click on the text input box for constant torque and type in the value you wish in order to quickly enter very high values. Let's do keep steady force next. What this basically means, keep steady is an attribute that just means you enter an amount of force, and this amount of force will constantly be applied to this object in order to keep it at a certain angle. The default angle it uses is the angle you have the object in when you create it. So with zero rotation on this block here, if I enter a keep steady force of 10,000, that much force is constantly going to be used to keep it at this rotation. So if something hits it, it's going to immediately start applying force to keep it back at this angle. Where this is useful, for example, can be if you want to have a vehicle, you want to build a vehicle with wheels that can, you know, hit a ramp or jump, and you don't want the vehicle to just easily tip over on its backside. If you enter some keep steady force, it will gradually keep the vehicle upright even if it's been launched into the air, and so it can land on its feet. So that's keep steady force. Next, collision channel is something you can use to prevent certain objects from colliding with each other. By default, all objects have a collision channel of 0, and that means they will collide with anything else, everything and anything else. But if we want certain objects not to collide with each other, the way collision channel works is any value above 0 will not collide with objects of the same channel. So if I create two objects with a collision channel of 1, then these two objects will not collide with each other. I accidentally gave these two objects also a keep steady value like the previous one, but I don't want that right now. So you can see these two objects do not collide with each other because they both have a collision channel of 1. But they will still collide with other collision channel 0 objects or other objects with collision channels that are not equal to 1. So you can have various groups of objects that don't collide with each other. Let's go over to the left side of the menu here, where many of these buttons here have the word sticky in them. What sticky means is if you set a value, a sticky value of 1, for example, it means this object I'm going to create will have a sticky value of 1, which means the first object it touches, it will stick to that object. And there's two different ways you can stick something to another object. You can stick it So, as I was saying, there's two different ways we can stick an object to another object. The first type is called Weld, because what that means is it will stick as if it was stuck together with some superhuman powerful glue that just does not move a muscle. The other type is we can stick it in a manner where it will be able to rotate at the point where it joins together, as so. So it's still stuck to it, but it's able to rotate. An example of where we would want to distinguish these two things would be, for example, so these are all stuck together in a weld fashion. Oh, well, actually this part didn't see. I've been doing these all with the same collision channel, which I didn't want to do, but I can so now I've fixed my mistake and I've sticked all these together in a weld fashion. And if I wanted to have wheels, if I want to attach wheels to this, which will stick to it, stick to the center of the wheel and also be able to rotate, I would want to have it set to rotate. But you can see a slight problem here is that's not the manner which I wanted a wheel to stick to it, because we have this set to stick at contact point. That's exactly where the joint will be made, is where each object contacts with the other. So if we change this to stick at object center, that's more appropriate for the function of a wheel, because it sticks to the center of the object, and it can still be rotate freely even though it's, in quotes, stuck to the other rectangle there. So that's these three buttons explained. This other button here, where it defaults to no connection, you can change it to either rope connect or bar connect. What rope connect means is when rope connect is enabled, each subsequent object you create will be created with a rope connection to the previous object. And what a rope connection means is that this object cannot be, the two objects which are joined with a rope connection cannot go farther apart than the distance of the rope, but they can, however, get closer. So they can, for example, get closer together, touch each other. The rope is still connected, but they cannot go further apart than the length of the rope. The length of the rope in this mode is always set to the exact distance apart the objects are when you created them, but the rope length can be adjusted. The other mode, bar connect mode, it connects the objects together, but as if you're welding them together with a bar. So in this mode, the objects must maintain the same distance. They cannot get closer or further apart, unlike a rope where they can get closer than the distance of the rope, but not further apart. This button next to placement type, we have a number of options. It defaults to normal, which means when we left click an object to create an object into the world, it will by default be a normal dynamic object. In place means that the object will never change its position. It will always maintain the same position, but it can still be collided with, etc., and affect other objects in every other way. It just always maintains the same position, static position. A nice shortcut to create objects in place is to simply, while you're in normal mode, spawn the item by using the right click of your mouse rather than the left click. Right click a dynamic object. Sorry, left click is the dynamic object and right click is the shortcut to create a static object. After that, we have the option to anchor a object in place. What this means is the object you select will be connected to a small static object in the center of the object, so it will be slightly different than just placing an object in static mode, as in it will be able to be rotated. For example, here is a square which is entered with anchor in place middle. And here is a square that is simply entered in place. This square is not moving at all, while this one, it maintains its position because it's been anchored to this smaller circle, which is a static object, but it can still rotate. It's still free to rotate, is the one difference here. We can also choose anchor in place top, which is the same thing, except it anchors the item to a small static dot on the top position of the item rather than the middle. The final option here is to anchor it to a rope. So the top object is a static object and it's connected via rope joint to the object you created. Putting it back to normal, we'll go over to the green buttons on the right side. Gravity effects 0 or gravity effects 1. Gravity effects 1 means gravity will affect the object, while gravity effects 0 means it will not. So I've just created this circle up here which gravity does not affect. So as you can see, it kind of just floats around as if we were in a no gravity situation. Invulnerable, toggle invulnerable 0 or 1. 1 means the object is invulnerable, while 0 means it's not, as in it is vulnerable or it can be destroyed. So these two objects I've created are vulnerable, which means they take damage when they collide with other objects. The damage is based on the density of the object and also the amount of force that was generated when it collided with another object. For example, colliding with something faster does more damage, or something heavier with more force hitting the object does more damage than something lighter hitting it. The amount of damage an object has taken is represented by this flickering animation, if you will. The more it flickers is an indication of the more closer it is to being destroyed or the more damage it has, and eventually if it runs out of HP it will just be destroyed. The edit menu has some options where you can add some more defense, if you will, to vulnerable objects to give them some damage reduction if you so need it. But that's the extent of the options in the tool menu for making objects take damage. The friction and bouncy values are quite self-explanatory. A higher friction value means the object is more rough and creates more drag when it's sliding across other objects. For example, if you're making wheels for a vehicle, you'll want a high friction value on those wheels. If you're making some kind of sloping slide that you want objects to slide down, you would want a lower, near 0 friction value. A bouncy value I would think is quite self-explanatory. Bouncy of 100 means that basically no energy is lost. This ball will bounce up and down forever because it's 100% efficient in bouncing basically. While if I entered a amount of 50, the bounce will become half the amount each time it bounces. The last option is visible, which is also, I imagine, quite self-explanatory. The object does not get rendered, it's invisible. You can only see it when you're in object creation mode. When you're in the normal play mode of object scroll mode or hand tool mode, you can't see this object. You can use this to select, create, say, an invisible floor that just kind of matches your background image. Say if I wanted to create a floor up here along this water line, I could create an invisible floor, and it would just match the background image. Or, you know, there's plenty of other reasons why you might want an object to be invisible. So that has been all of the current tool menu options which you can change before you create new objects. So in general, these are just options that affect the next object you create in the object creation mode.